Hello, Bashar.
And to you, good day.
I have 3 questions.
Oh, all right, I'm a genie again.
Yes, you are. Okay, so the first question is, can you talk more about the Rh negative blood type?
It all stems back to 2 main things. First and foremost, as we have said, there is the naturally evolved hominid that developed on your planet up to a certain point. You typically refer to this, though there are variations, as Homo habilis, Homo erectus. You follow me?
Yes.
Then, an extraterrestrial race called the Anu, or what you call the Anunnaki, injected their DNA into some of the branches of Homo habilis, creating what you now know yourselves to be as Homo sapien, which then from the get-go is a hybridized species. So you have markers in you of not only the original naturally, bless you, evolved hominid on your planet, but also of many different extraterrestrial sources, because the Anunnaki themselves were hybridized. So now humans are hyper-hybridized. And then with the introduction of the Greys and the hybridization agenda, humans are hyper-hybridized. You have markers, genetic markers in your blood, in your DNA, from many different species throughout the cosmos. And that is the general origin of some of the differences you find in your blood types, and also some of the differences you find in what you call the so-called different races on your planet.
Okay, because only a small percentage of the population is Rh negative. So
I know.
I was wondering
Well, that's
why.
a very specific line that goes to a very specific connection. And sometimes it remains and sometimes it's bred out.
What's that connection?
One moment. We are checking to see if this is an appropriate conversation. There's a lot of layers to the answer, so please understand that we're going to give you an answer, but it's more layered than what you're going to hear. There's more to it, and it's a story that we can talk about at length at another time, but we'll give you the extremely short version. Yes?
Yes.
It has to do with the star system of Sirius.
Wow. Oh, okay.
That's all we're allowed to say at the moment. This is a complex story that needs to unfold in very precise ways, so there'll be no misunderstanding and misinterpretation of what we're going to say about it. We will talk about it at some point.
Okay, I understand. Thank you. My second question is, do I have hybrid children?
Yes.
Okay.
Don't say how many.
I wasn't. Oh. Not me. Okay, so my third and final question has to do with relationships.
Yes.
Okay, so I was in a relationship that was my highest excitement. I was
At the time.
Yes, that's
All
correct. Right. I was continuing to work on myself and grow, but it turned unhealthy. I felt that I wasn't being respected, so I ended it.
And that means you continued to grow.
Yes.
Because
definitely.
you recognized when something was truly vibrationally incompatible with your growth, and you did the thing that is actually the most loving thing you could do. Show the other person in the relationship or people the consequences of their choices as opposed to the consequences of yours, and giving them an opportunity to either decide to match your frequency and grow with you, or to go find what works for them. Because otherwise, they're in a relationship with someone they may think you are, but are not really in a relationship with you, and that does them no service at all. So you did the most compassionate thing if you are truly, truly clear that it was vibrationally incompatible to your growth and your passion.
Okay, but I understand.
But, what?
I understand what you said, but
We'll find out if that's true.
well, my question is, why didn't I attract that version of that person that I prefer?
Because you needed to have this experience in your belief system, obviously. You needed to grow in a way and bring yourself to a level of expression where you are more capable of doing that, but you weren't really capable of doing it then. And that's okay, because that's what you needed at the time. Nothing happens by accident. It all happens for a reason. And if you learned something about yourself and became a stronger version of yourself, and shall we say, less likely to accept things that are not vibrationally compatible with you, then you strengthened yourself closer to the point where you'll get a reflection more and more and more of something that is now more compatible with you. But don't put expectation on what that's supposed to look like, because you don't even necessarily know that that relationship needs to be with a human.
Okay.
Don't read into it. The relationship could be with a rock, with a tree, with a cat, with the sky, with a drop of water. The first and primary relationship is with yourself.
Exactly.
And therefore, this gave you an opportunity to stand on your own 2 feet, to show that you mean business, to show that you will not, as you say in your colloquial language, take any guff, or let someone decide for you who you are. Yes?
Yes.
It's all a process. The process is the point. There is nowhere more important you need to be than where you are at any given moment. So drop the insistence that you think it's supposed to look a certain way, because again, you have no idea how it really needs to look. And again, as I said before, even if that person had changed and become more compatible with you, they're not the same person anyway, so who cares who they are? Yes?
Yes.
That person taught you a valuable lesson. You can love them and thank them for it.
Yeah, you're right.
I know. Surprise, surprise.
I know. Thank you so much, Bashar. That really helped me.
Our unconditional love to you.
Thank you, Bashar. Love
Right now, at this moment, this is the relationship you have. In the next moment, you will have a different one. The next moment, you will have another one. And the next moment, you'll have another one. Remember that the purpose of relationships is for everyone in the relationship to help the other in the relationship become more of who they are. So even if it's vibrationally incompatible in that person, they still helped you become more of who you are.
That's true.
I know.
You're a genius.
I just see it as it is.
Thank you, Jeannie.
Hi, Bashar.
And you good day.
I have a question about a story in the Bible,
A story in the Bible, yes?
and I would like to know if it's just a story or if it actually happened.
Maybe both. Maybe a combination of things. What's the story?
The story of Noah's Ark.
In a sense, it did happen, but it's not limited to the one story that's in the Bible, and there are some things that are a little bit different than what was related. But it basically talks about the flood. It talks about the time when an asteroid struck the Atlantic Ocean, wiped out Atlantis, and caused massive change and tsunamis in different places in North, South, Central America, in Europe, in Africa, in the Mediterranean. Many different people traveled on different kinds of boats and vehicles to save themselves and perpetuate some of their culture. That is the story of Noah's Ark. But if you actually examine many different cultures around your world, you'll find they all have similar stories, except for the South Sea Islanders who live in the Pacific, who didn't experience that because the asteroid fell in the Atlantic. So there are different Noah's Ark stories by different names in various cultures in the North, Central, South Americas, in Europe, in Africa, the Mediterranean, and so on and so forth. They all represent a general reality, a general truth of a massive flood catastrophe from an asteroidal or cometary strike.
It's very interesting.
Yes, it is.
And these people that build the boats, who warned them? Who told them to build the boats?
Well, some of their own people may have, because again, remember that throughout your civilization, there have always been intuitives. There have always been mediums and channels and people who could converse with beings on other levels, and sometimes they might receive such information from extraterrestrial sources who might say, hey, there's a big rock on the way. You better get ready. So it can be many different sources for different cultures.
I have another question.
Yes.
One of my favorite shows on TV is called Star Trek,
Yes.
and it was created by a man, Gene Roddenberry.
Yes, we understand.
And I was wondering if Gene Roddenberry was contacted.
Not directly in that sense, but that particular Gene and another Gene that worked on the series, who co-created together many of the principles, were simply intuitive enough to tap into many things that actually do exist out here. Not all of them, but many of them. One of the most primary ones they tapped into that is a reality is what they called the Prime Directive.
It's interesting.
Yes, it is.
And are there any representative aliens on that show that are similar to actual aliens?
There's always going to be some similarity if you take in the vastness of the cosmos and the multiverse. There's always going to be something that's similar to something out there somewhere. But the ones that were perhaps a little bit more representative, although again, please don't say, Bashar said that this was literal. But some of the ones that are more representative are things like the Vulcans, to some degree, and other beings and other species that were depicted. The Tholians, in some sense, do exist. We're actually aware of a species very much like that. A crystalline-type entity, a silicon-based life form. And there are a few others that exhibit some of the traits of other species we're aware of, but there are a vast array of species out here, most of which are absolutely nothing like what was depicted on your show, because for the most part, your show had to use human beings to depict the aliens, and most aliens don't look like human beings at all. Some of them do, and if they do, they're probably genetically related to you in some way, shape, or form, like us. But most alien species look nothing like you at all.
And a last curiosity of mine. We touched on this last time. The Jews being led out of Egypt.
Yes.
Can you elaborate on who brought them out and why
They were guided by extraterrestrial sources.
And why were they brought to Israel? Is there something special about that place?
There is, and we will talk about that another time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Tadeo.
I could feel you coming, Nanian.
Yes, like a wave, right? From Hawaii.
Begin with your Ustream.
Okay. What have you learned lately from a mistake that you made?
Mistake? I learned that I don't make them. I learned that everything that happens for a reason, so I wouldn't call it a mistake. Unexpected things? Absolutely. But I don't call them mistakes. I call them unexpected adventures, unexpected perspectives, things that open up a doorway, a window to something new and something different that gives me an opportunity to look at something from a new perspective, a different perspective, and discover a new aspect and a new understanding of myself as I grow. So we don't really call them mistakes, but they can certainly be unexpected.
That definitely demonstrates how your energy is uplifted by recalibrations, in a sense.
Yes.
As opposed to feeling like you made the same mistake again, or, the kinds of things that humans...
If I make the same mistake again, it's because I enjoyed it so much the first time. That would be the only reason.
So can you have an error in judgment?
In a sense, yes, of course we can. Because we don't know everything. We are evolving like you are. Now, it doesn't happen that much anymore because of our evolutionary place and because we are tapping more into our spirit selves and have a broader picture, a bigger point of view. But it can happen again. It happens as an unexpected happenstance in certain ways that you can say goes back to a so-called quote-unquote error in judgment. But since we don't really have insistences and assumptions and expectations in that way? An error in judgment? Well, that's a relative term, because a so-called error in judgment can put us in a place that gives us profound information we otherwise wouldn't have had. So was it an error?
It's so amazing how this illuminates the difference between thinking supportive thoughts or choosing supportive thoughts.
Yes.
On a very simple thing like the idea
Yes.
of quote unquote mistakes.
Yes, I'm not saying that's an egotistical position. Oh, I can simply do no wrong. But it's an idea of allowance. It's an idea of recognizing that we don't know everything. And therefore, we are capable of being surprised by things, and things may go in unexpected directions other than what we may have to some degree thought. But we don't put so much into our thoughts that it's really that much of a surprise that things don't go that way. Because we allow for the flow. We allow for those things to happen. Therefore, how can we really be surprised that they do, other than by being delighted by something that we didn't know was going to happen?
So is this sort of part of the human neurosis that we put so much into making the right decisions,
Yes.
discerning accurately, that our self-worth becomes tied up?
Absolutely.
And then you can't even learn from the mistake because you're so concerned that it might show that you're worthless to begin with?
Correct.
Does that sound familiar? So it's very interesting that just this kind of a change could have such a profound effect on the way you live your life when you find
Yes.
that you have changes in the way you perceive something.
Isn't that what we have always said about if the definitions you're using don't work for you, create a definition that does? It's the same thing. Create a definition that works for you. So instead of going, oh, I made a mistake, I made an error, something's wrong, I'm not worthy, it's like, oh, things didn't turn out as I assumed or expected, even if I did really assume or expect that much anyway, which I probably didn't. But nevertheless, it must have brought me to a place that's going to serve me in ways I couldn't possibly have comprehended from the state I was in before. But now I'm in a new state. I wonder what's going to happen. Oh, this is going to be fun. That's a different definition. And it creates a completely different experience. So why not choose that if that's the kind of experiences you prefer? Because remember, experience is a result of definition, not the other way around.
And even that attitude, doesn't it come from the idea that the universe is a benevolent place?
It comes from the idea that the universe is an allowing place. And that is the most benevolent thing it can do, is allow whatever you choose to be real to be real. Remember, unconditional support, unconditional love, unconditional existence. So you can choose to experience the universe as non-beneficial because it is so allowing, it will allow you to assume that it's not beneficial to you. That's how allowing it is.
So if you project onto it the idea that it's a beneficial universe in the sense that because the basic vibration is love and everything that you create is designed to teach you to become more expanded.
Yes.
That you can actually trust that what you're experiencing can be used in a positive way.
Why not?
And then mistakes are very different from that perspective.
Yes, because they're not really mistakes anymore. They're course corrections, unexpected course corrections.
It's really lovely.
It is.
Let's
Yes.
see. Where do thoughts come from? And which comes first, emotions or thoughts?
Emotions come first, after definitions that you believe in. Then emotions, then thoughts, then behaviors.
And what is a thought?
Well, it's the idea of a feeling that generates a vibrational resonance that then sets up that resonance in the neurological patterns of the brain that then create coherent thoughts that go along with that feeling and then together create behaviors that reflect the thoughts and the feelings in the vibrational patterns that were set up in those systems in your body.
So do humans have certain thoughts? That's the collective, right? Where humans have very similar thoughts. Is a
You
species.
can allow there to be a similarity of thought by having a similarity of frequency, but the similarity of frequency comes from having a similarity of definition.
I was just thinking about the idea like a beagle dog, you know, his
Yes.
highest excitement is to run around and smell things,
Sometimes.
you know, a lot of times, having known a few beagles in my day.
Yes. And so,
And with humans, obviously, we're really into thought and thinking and communicating our thoughts to each other.
and that's fine, but understand that your thoughts are still representative of things that you believe to be true and things that you feel to be true. And the way you deliver the thoughts is usually done through a behavior that also matches the idea of the thoughts and the feelings and the definition. It's actually delivered as a whole package. You may think that you're just having a conversation of thoughts, but if you actually pay attention to body language when thoughts are being exchanged, you'll see it's far more than that.
Because it's just the desire to communicate and to experience a reflection.
Yes.
I had a request for you to describe the Tri-Skillian, the family crest.
To describe it?
Yes, and to explain the meaning of it and something along those lines.
Well, the idea, again, is that the crest is representative of first contact specialists. Yes? So the triangle is the basic unit underlying physical reality. It's the simplest geometric you can have that actually has some degree of dimensionality. A tetrahedron, a triangle, it's a stable form. It's the first stable geometric. So it represents the concept of physical reality. The fact that it's a Tri-Skillian means the arms extend beyond the triangle. This is us reaching out to different aspects of creation, reaching out to different civilizations. The spiral in the middle is the activation principle. It's the energy, it's the vibration that we share with those of like mind, of like heart, of like frequency. It is the activation principle that drives us forward to follow our passion and make connection with those throughout the cosmos.
Thank you. In regards to the idea of infinite parallel realities,
Yes.
does this idea mean that any weird idea or conspiracy theory, for example, that someone believes in or can imagine to be true actually exists as a physical reality that they will shift to?
It does exist. Whether they shift to it or not depends upon the degree to which they buy into it.
So what is the challenge associated with conspiracy theories, since that seems to be part of the human conversation of what is true and what is not true and what is quote-unquote conspiracy theory?
The challenge with it is similar to the conundrum that we have put out before, where, well, I'll ask the question back to you. What is the worst form? And again, to some degree, I'm being metaphorical, but I have to use this terminology because it's what you understand. What is the worst form of hell? The one you don't know you're in, because then you can never get out. So conspiracy theories have a quality where they can act as an entrapment for the mind in such a way that you can really not find your way out in a physical lifetime if you go too deep. It's a kind of negative belief system that perpetuates itself in a unique way that traps you in what you believe to be the only real reality and doesn't give you the tools or makes the tools invisible by which to unravel that reality if you go too deeply within them.
Yes, because there's a lot of discussion about, well, what harm is there in these ideas?
That is the harm.
And there is harm in them.
But it's self-harm. You're creating that harm for yourself.
Because it then does not allow you to discern the truth even when facts are presented to you.
Well, it doesn't allow you to discern another truth, a different truth. Because remember, all truths are true. You're making it true for yourself by vibrating in accord with it. So it is a truth, but it may not necessarily be the truth that gives you the benefit of having a perspective that will allow you to make other kinds of choices.
So that, in a sense, is a way to discern it. If the belief system excludes all other possible realities.
Yes. But the thing of it is again, it's like the phrase that a person who is in denial that they're in denial. Because if you go too deeply in it, there is no capability of recognizing that it has shut out all other truths, because it's made the one truth seem like the only truth, to the point where you don't even think that there are other truths.
So
that's the hell you don't know you're in.
That's a description of hell.
Yes, that's what we said. Didn't we use the word hell?
So, well, that reminded me of the idea that when people die and they have a strong belief in hell.
Well, that's a little different. Because the idea is they may bring immediately an experience of what they believed very strongly they would experience, but because in spirit reality things change instantly or almost instantly as you think something different, someone who is suddenly finding themselves burning in hell might instantly go, oh, I don't prefer this, and bang, they're out of it. Because they're in spirit where they can instantly change with very little time lag. That's a little different. Okay. They don't have the same entrapment mechanism in spirit that they might have in physical reality because of the definition of what physical reality is.
So this is, in a sense, a furtherance of the black box. This
Yes.
is a negative belief system that, as a physical being, if you engage with this negative belief system,
Yes.
it will ultimately tie your hands, in a sense, to where you don't realize that any other choices are possible.
Yes, that's the belief structure of those particular belief systems, yes.
Wow, thank you. That's very
Yes.
helpful.
You could say, in a sense, that there are, well, I'll just put it this way, hierarchies of negative beliefs and lowerarchies of negative beliefs. Because that's what negative beliefs are all about. Separation into hierarchies instead of looking at whole systems. So it may make something seem so far down because it's creating those layers, it's creating an apparency of those layers that you start to feel like you're in a bottomless pit. That's why you describe hell as being below you. In a pit, a fiery pit from which there is no escape. Of course, that's not actually true, because you can always escape by dying.
So that's the best part then, huh? That any entrapment that's created as a physical being
is temporary.
Is temporary, because once you're in spirit, so to speak, you will immediately or very quickly recognize that you have other alternatives in terms of belief.
Because that's the very definition of being in spirit. You have a broader range of alternatives and options.
And you probably also have clearer communication with your guides at that point and others in your class, in a sense, to help you understand what's happening to you.
Yes. Now, that doesn't mean that there can't be and haven't been some individuals who are so structured and so resistant that they might have had some limited experience in what you call the lower spirit levels, the astral realms, where they might feel trapped or maybe not even know that they've died, and they need the guidance of a guide on that side to help them realize they've crossed over. That can happen, but it's not really as common as many people on your planet may think. And it's something that happened more often in the older days when you didn't have as many ideas about the afterlife as you do now. And so it's less likely you will choose to experience the idea of being earthbound as a spirit in a negative way. But you see, this is originally what exorcists were. They were earthbound spirit psychologists. You've died. Move on. Get a life. It's just that you've wrapped it all up in this horrifying picture of demons and poltergeists and so on and so forth. And some of that can exist, but again, not quite in the way that you may think. And some things you think of as trapped ghosts are simply echoes of a reality breaking through in the fabric of space and time, like a recording on wax or in a record that you're simply picking up on. It doesn't mean that there's actually a trapped spirit there. You may simply be picking up on an echo of something from another life somewhere else. because there might be bleed through in the parallel realities that you are sensitive enough to perceive. You have to be able to tell the difference.
So it's as if our entire relationship with death has slowly been evolving over, say, the last 100 years. I know probably longer, but
Yes.
the general idea being that we've gone from being utterly terrified that we'll go to hell
Yes.
if you make a mistake,
Yes.
to recognizing that life doesn't end at death,
No.
and that you can communicate with other consciousnesses that are on the other side through various means once you have clearer communication with your own higher self, I would imagine.
It's an infinite continuum.
So all of our evolutionary steps are being reflected in our change in the relationship with death.
Yes. Because it's a passage, a profound passage of realization and awakening for you.
So one of the questions that came up from Ustream was, how do I release the fear of losing a loved one?
Well, you have to first understand that your definition says they are lost. They're not. They're still around. You just have to learn how to communicate differently with them. It's like saying, I have lost a loved one because they've moved to Cincinnati. Can't you pick up the phone and call them? Yes, you can. Can't you maybe even in some way, shape, or form visit them? Well, yes, you can. Because you do that when you go to sleep and go out of body. You visit, you talk, you chat, you play. You can communicate when you are physically awake by being sensitive to the communications that may be coming from them. They will receive your communication, generally speaking, no problem. It's easier for them to hear you than it is for most of you to hear them at this point. But you're becoming more sensitive to hearing them. And again, remember, they communicate in different ways more often than not, mostly through synchronicity, not necessarily through words, although that can happen. And there are many other ways. So the idea is you're developing a different relationship with the idea even of what physical reality is. And when you know it's more like a dream, then you will understand that there doesn't have to be such a big separation in your definitions between the concept of physical and non-physical. They'll start to blend together. And as we do in our civilization, you will talk to spirits all the time, left and right. Our world is full of spirits that we talk to all the time. It's not just us walking around.
So it's really about changing your relationship with a loved one when they're not physically present, and not demeaning the fact that they're not physically there.
Yes.
Recognizing that as you focus on it and work within yourself, you can actually enhance the communication with that person.
Yes. Two things. Two important things to understand about this. Number one, many times a person will die, become non-physical ahead of you to lure you into more understanding, to focus on the spirit world, because that's where you need to look to understand yourself. By trying to reach out and communicate with them, you stretch yourself and start understanding more about your true nature. So that's sometimes a gift that they give you by dying first and you needing to reach out to them. The other thing is to understand. One moment. One moment. We're having a chat. One moment. The Spirit asks that we stop there.
Okay.
There will be more on this at another time, because at another time, the information will have a more profound effect. Many of you will get the information in your dreams, rather than vocally this way. Continue with another question.
May you share with us your perspective on the wars in the higher dimensional planes and the generals' factors, or the...
Excuse me for a moment, we're laughing. Because there are no wars in the higher planes. That's a science fiction concept from Earth.
Yeah, because once the frequency reaches a certain level, it's harmonious, basically.
There is no conflict. It may not always be vibrationally compatible, but there's no need for conflict. Because at that level, you know you can access whatever you need, even if it's very different from what someone else needs. So what's the point of conflict when you have infinite access to infinite abundance to fulfill your needs? War is the product of you believing that there isn't enough, that there's a lack of this or that, or that the vibrational incompatibility between you and another is cause for destruction, as opposed to validating the differences between you, which is what would create true harmony.
It seems like such a challenging thing.
Seems that way, yes, but because of your belief systems.
Is part of this having to do with the male-female idea that...
Well, that's in the mix, but it still comes down to your belief systems about these ideas. And the way you view the concept of differences.
I mean, just the idea that we have war on this planet.
Yes. Well, it's very exciting. But
Well, clearly...
it doesn't have to continue as a necessary way of expressing yourselves. Again, it comes from lack of self-worth, or at least the feeling that generates that idea. It comes from belief in lack. Lack of yourself, lack of other things, lack of abundance, lack of compatibility. Comes from the idea of believing in lack. There's not enough, or you're too different than me, and that's a bad thing. This doesn't happen on the higher planes. It's nonsensical on the higher planes. The only place it can make sense, or seem to make sense, is in the lower planes. That's why it's confined to the lower planes, because it doesn't make sense anywhere else.
So if these ideas stem from belief, how do they intersect with biology in the sense that perhaps testosterone and other hormonal conditions may stimulate the idea of aggression?
Well, yes, but again, remember that this chemistry takes its form and takes its cue from the belief systems that exist.
Right, so...
But it wouldn't. It would take different forms with different belief systems. It would express itself in different ways, more creative ways.
Okay, so the fact...
More supportive ways.
So the fact that we see testosterone expressed in an aggressive fashion or dominant fashion, that has to do with our belief systems at the very fundamental level, how the testosterone is affecting us.
Yes, because it could just simply be expressed as something akin to confidence. Yes?
I'm finding this stunning in a way because I know that we feel subject to our biology as humans. And then that encourages a lot of behaviors that aren't really very integrated.
Yes, but again, that's because you think that the biology controls you instead of your beliefs controlling the biology.
But it's actually the beliefs intersecting with a normal hormonal state.
Yes, and then distorting it through negative belief.
Oh, so humans aren't really like this. I mean,
No.
in the sense that we're not designed to be like this.
Not fundamentally, no. But you are designed, so to speak, to be like this in a reality where you're exploring the concept of transforming this kind of negative limitation into positive freedom. So it goes hand in hand with the reality experience of having a master class of going from darkness to light. But fundamentally, in general, no. Understand that even though you may consider us an extraterrestrial, we are, in a sense, another type of human. And we don't experience those things.
So when you're born, is it the idea that the way that we perceive the separation from the higher realms, the instant you're born, I guess, that's part of the belief system that then will lead to certain behaviors being expressed once the the different hormonal levels start kicking in?
May I ask you a question?
Yes.
When you go to Hawaii, you expect the things of Hawaii to be there, don't you?
Yes.
So when you decide to go to Earth as a spirit, you expect the things of Earth to be there, don't you? Therefore, you know going in, I may forget who I am and have to recover who I am through a process. That sounds interesting and sounds like fun. Okay, I understand the lay of the land. I'll do it. So in a sense, you then have to remember that you knew what you were doing when you chose to go to that particular country, because those are the things of that country.
And if I'm understanding you correctly, what you're saying is that as we change the beliefs, we will,
Yes.
our experience of interacting with our biological states will change in a way that will perhaps increase the harmony.
Yes. I cannot begin to tell you how exciting it is for a spirit to imagine that it could actually have an experience of transformation that is so visceral that it doesn't even remember that it chose it. It's extremely alluring to spirits to imagine that that can be possible. So the idea of going to a place where you get to experience great depths, but know that you will have a real visceral, accelerated experience of transformation to something wondrous is almost intoxicating for some spirits.
And people or beings that choose to incarnate as animals and have this intensely connected experience with nature,
Yes.
where their lives are on the line. And I mean, it's
Yes.
compared to us, the degree to which they integrate with the physical world is amazing.
Oh, you integrate with the physical world. It's just that you're in denial as a species about the fact that you are integrated, and that's why you don't experience it that much. But you're integrated. You have to be integrated because you are an extension of nature.
So we must be really different that way, because
You are.
when you look at certain animals, they're designed specifically for their environment to
Yes.
the point where you
And
can't
so
believe it.
are you.
So what's our environment then? We're not designed to be
You'll
in the
find
forest.
out.
Oh, you mean like a space environment?
No, not necessarily. You'll find out. End of discussion. It is now time to take a short break, and we will resume with the crystallization of these concepts with your holotope experience very soon.